My own son charged me $3,000 a month just to let me hold my grandson. So I sold his entire inheritance to strangers. I am writing this with trembling hands because I am still trying to process the absolute cruelty of the people I trusted most. My name is Laura, and for the past 6 months, I have been living in a psychological nightmare directed by my own flesh and blood. I thought I was helping a young, struggling family get back on their feet. I thought I was buying love, but while I was writing checks to keep a roof over their heads, my son Kevin and his wife were secretly slipping crushed sedatives into my tea every single night. They were methodically gaslighting me, trying to make me believe I had dementia so they could seize control of my estate and shove me into a nursing home. How do you survive looking into the eyes of the boy you raised and realizing he does not see a mother, but a dying animal to be harvested for parts? I gave them my home, my dignity, and my heart, and they paid me back with poison and betrayal. I have finally evicted them and exposed their crimes to the police. But the silence in this empty house is deafening. I have burned their future to save my own life, yet I feel like I am the one bleeding out. Please, I need to know, did I do the right thing? My name is Laura Bennett. I am 48 years old. Though if you ask my employees at the Gilded Crumb, the artisanal bakery I have owned for 15 years in the upscale suburbs of Bellevue, Washington, they would tell you I have the energy of a woman half my age and the patience of a saint. They are half right. The energy is real, fueled by double-shot espressos and the sheer terror of failure. The patience, however, is a carefully curated mask. I live in a 4-bedroom colonial house on a street where the lawns are manicured to the millimeter, and the homeowners association sends you a polite but threatening letter if your trash cans are left out past 6 in the evening. It is a quiet life, a successful life. I am a single woman who built an empire of sourdough and ganache from nothing, paid off her mortgage, and finally, after decades of noise, earned the right to silence. But silence, I have learned, is often just the deep breath before the scream. It was a Sunday morning in mid-October. The Seattle sky was its usual shade of bruised purple and gray, spitting rain against the bay windows of my living room. I was sitting in my favorite wingback chair, nursing a cup of Earl Grey and enjoying the fact that I did not have to be anywhere. My 2 sons were grown. Mark, my eldest, was 30, a successful architect living in Chicago, sending me Christmas cards and the occasional guilt-ridden text message. And then there was Kevin, my 22-year-old baby, the one who stayed behind. The doorbell rang, slicing through the quiet like a serrated knife. I knew who it was before I even checked the security camera. Kevin had called 3 times last night, but I had been too exhausted to answer. When I opened the heavy oak door, the wet autumn air rushed in, carrying the scent of damp leaves and expensive perfume. Kevin stood there, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, looking like a man who was trying to shrink inside his own hoodie. Beside him stood Brittany, his wife of 1 year, and in her arms, wrapped in a blanket that looked far too thin for the weather, was Toby, my 6-month-old grandson. "Hi, Mom," Kevin said. His voice was tight, the vocal cords strained by something I could not quite place. Was it fear? Or was it the rehearsals of a speech practiced in the car? "Kevin, Brittany," I said, stepping aside to let them in. "I did not know you were coming over. Is everything okay?" Brittany offered me a smile that did not reach her eyes. It was a practiced expression, the kind you see on reality television stars right before they throw a drink in someone's face. "We just wanted to see you. Laura, it has been a while. It had been 2 weeks. We settled into the living room. I offered them coffee. They declined. I offered to hold Toby. Brittany hesitated for a fraction of a second. A microaggression I caught immediately. Before handing him over, he was heavy, warm, and smelled of baby powder and milk. Looking at his sleeping face, I felt that familiar tug in my chest. The grandmother instinct, it was powerful, intoxicating, and exactly what they were counting on. He is getting so big, I whispered, stroking Toby's cheek. He is, Kevin said, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. He looked around the room, his eyes lingering on the new flat-screen television I had purchased last month, then drifting to the antique vase on the mantel. It was an appraising look. It made my skin crawl. Mom, we need to talk. Kevin started. He clasped his hands together. Brittany and I, Saoyudzing howling. 2 hash is greater than we are struggling. I stiffened. I carefully placed Toby back into his carrier on the floor. Struggling how? Is it the apartment? It is everything. Brittany chimed in. Her voice was high and breathy. A performance of fragility. The rent went up. The car needs repairs. And with the baby, Saoyudzing howling. 2 hash is greater than I mean. Diapers alone are bankrupting us. We did the math last night. Laura, we are in the red. Deep. I folded my arms across my chest. This was a familiar song. Over the years, I had bailed Kevin out of credit card debt, paid for a semester of college he never finished, and even covered the deposit on their current apartment. I had always told myself I was helping him find his footing, but lately, I was beginning to wonder if I was just greasing the slide. I see, I said, keeping my voice neutral. And what is your plan? Kevin and Brittany exchanged a look. It was a quick, sharp glance. A signal. Well, Kevin cleared his throat. Brittany wants to go back to work. She got an offer at a boutique downtown. It is entry level, but it is something. The problem is daycare. Have you seen the prices in this city? It would take her entire paycheck just to have a stranger watch Toby. So, Brittany interrupted, leaning forward, her eyes wide and pleading. We were thinking, Saoyudzing howling. 2 hash is greater than since you own the bakery and you have managers who run the day-to-day stuff. Saoyudzing howling. 2 hash is greater than maybe you could help us. Help you pay for daycare? I asked. No. Kevin said quickly. We were thinking you could watch him. I blinked. Watch him? Just during the work week. Kevin said, the words tumbling out faster now. Brittany's shift is 10 hours, plus the commute. So, maybe drop him off here at 7 in the morning. Pick him up around 6. Monday through Friday, I stared at them. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. 10 hours a day, 50 hours a week. They were asking me to raise their child. Kevin, I said slowly, I run a business. I might not be needing the dough every morning anymore, but I handle the payroll, the suppliers, the marketing. I work a full day, but you can work from home, Kevin argued, his tone shifting from pleading to demanding. You have this huge house. You are here all alone. Ideally, we need someone who is family, someone we trust, and Saoyudzing howling. 2 hash is greater than we cannot pay you. Mom, obviously, that is the whole point. We are trying to save money. I looked at Brittany. She was nodding vigorously, dabbing at a dry eye with a tissue. Then, my gaze dropped to the floor. Next to her feet, there it was, the red flag. Sitting on my Persian rug was Brittany's handbag. It was a beige, quilted leather bag with a distinctive gold chain. I knew that bag. I had seen it in the window of a luxury store in downtown Seattle just last week. It was a designer piece, retailing for at least $2,000. My blood temperature dropped a few degrees. They were drowning in debt, unable to afford diapers. Yet my daughter-in-law was sporting a purse that cost more than my first car. Is that new? I asked, pointing a manicured finger at the bag. Brittany froze. Her hand instinctively went to cover the logo. Oh, this? No, it is Saoyutsing Haling. 2# is greater than it is a knockoff. A fake, got it for $20. I am a woman who deals in details. I know the difference between high-quality leather and cheap polyurethane. The stitching on that bag was impeccable. The hardware was solid brass. It was real, and she was lying to my face. I cannot do it, I said. My voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. What? Kevin looked stunned, as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. I said no. I cannot watch Toby for 50 hours a week. I raised my children. Kevin, I did my time with sleepless nights and teething and tantrums. I love my grandson, but I am not a free nanny. You are selfish. Kevin spat out. The transformation was instant. The fragile, pleading boy vanished, replaced by a snarling, entitled man-child. You have everything. Mom, look at this place. You sit here in your ivory tower while we are drowning, and you will not lift a finger. I have lifted many fingers. Kevin, I retorted, standing up. I lifted my checkbook for your car. I lifted my credit card for your wedding. But I will not lift my freedom to fix your poor financial planning, especially when you seem to have money for luxury accessories. Brittany gasped, grabbing the bag and pulling it onto her lap. You are judging me? You think just because you have money you can judge us? I think if you can afford that bag, you can afford a babysitter for a few hours, I said coldly. Kevin stood up, his face flushing a dangerous shade of red. He loomed over me, using his height to intimidate. It was a tactic he had learned from his father, and it made my stomach churn with old, buried trauma. This is about Mark, is it not? Kevin shouted. You always gave Mark everything. He got the college fund. He got the down payment for his condo in Chicago. But me? I get nothing. I get the scraps. Mark worked 2 jobs in college. I reminded him, fighting to keep my voice steady. Mark did not drop out 3 times. Mark did not gamble his savings on cryptocurrency scams. Shut up, Kevin screamed. The baby woke up and started to wail, a piercing sound that echoed off the high ceilings. Come on, Brittany, we are leaving. Kevin grabbed the baby carrier roughly. Brittany scrambled up, shooting me a look of pure venom. If you do not help us, Kevin said, pausing at the door, his hand on the brass knob, then you do not get to be a part of this family. You do not get to see Toby. Not on weekends. Not on holidays. Never. Kevin, do not use your son as a weapon. I warned, my heart hammering against my ribs. You made your choice. Laura, he sneered. He did not call me Mom. He called me Laura. He pulled the door open and ushered Brittany out. Then, he looked at me one last time, his eyes cold and dead, devoid of any affection. You are going to die alone in this big house, he said. Then he slammed the door. The sound was like a gunshot. It vibrated through the floorboards, up my legs, and settled deep in my bones. I stood there in the hallway, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. sudden and violent. The silence that followed was not the peaceful silence I had cherished. It was heavy. It was suffocating. I walked to the window and watched their rusted sedan peel out of the driveway. I told myself I did the right thing. I told myself I needed to set boundaries. But as I looked at my reflection in the dark glass, a woman standing alone in a house too big for one person, I could not shake the feeling that I had just signed a contract I had not bothered to read. I did not know it then, but the war had just begun. The silence was not empty. It was heavy. It occupied space in my house like a physical intruder. For 5 months, the phone did not ring. The driveway remained empty. The nursery I had foolishly begun to curate in the guest room, stocking it with high-quality wooden toys and soft organic cotton blankets, gathered dust. Thanksgiving passed in a blur of solitary wine and a turkey breast for one. Christmas was worse. I sent a large box of gifts to their apartment complex in Renton. It contained winter clothes for Toby, a gift card for groceries, and a check for $500. 3 days later, the package returned. It had not even been opened. Across the label, in red marker, someone had scrawled 3 words that cut deeper than any knife. Return to sender. It was psychological warfare, and I was losing. By February, my resolve had eroded into a desperate, aching need. I needed to know if my grandson was walking. I needed to know if he had his father's eyes or mine. This desperation drove me to do something foolish on a rainy Tuesday evening. I drove to their apartment. I did not intend to knock. I told myself I just wanted to see the building, to perhaps catch a glimpse of them walking from the car to the front door. It was a pathetic justification, the kind a stalker tells themselves. I parked my Lexus across the street, the engine idling, the windshield wipers slapping back and forth like a metronome counting down my dignity. I sat there for 20 minutes. The complex was run down, with peeling beige paint and overflowing dumpsters. Guilt gnawed at my stomach. My grandson was living there, while I had 2 empty guest rooms heated to a perfect 72 degrees. Then, I saw the blue and red lights. A patrol car pulled up behind me, its lights flashing in my rearview mirror. My heart hammered against my ribs. I rolled down the window as a young officer approached. He looked no older than Kevin. License and registration. Made him, he said, shining a flashlight into my eyes. I fumbled with my purse, my hands shaking. Officer, is there a problem? I asked. I am just sitting here. We received a call about a suspicious vehicle, he said, glancing at my address on the license. Loitering. Potential harassment. Harassment? The word tasted like bile. The caller described your vehicle specifically. The officer continued, his voice softening as he realized I was a middle-aged woman in a cashmere coat and not a threat. They said you have been stalking the residents in Unit 4B. I looked up at Unit 4B. The blinds were drawn, but I saw a shadow move. Brittany, she was watching. She had called the police on her own mother-in-law. I am the grandmother. I whispered, my voice cracking. I just wanted to see if the baby was okay. The officer looked uncomfortable. Look, madam, unless you have a court order for visitation, you need to leave. If you come back, they can file a restraining order. Go home. I drove home with hot tears blurring my vision. The shame was absolute. I had been treated like a criminal for the crime of loving my family. That night, I sat in my dark living room and realized that Brittany was not just petty. She was dangerous. She knew exactly how to use the system to hurt me. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. The caller ID made my breath hitch. It was Kevin. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I had to maintain some semblance of self-respect, even though my hand trembled as I pressed the green button. Saluting howling. Due cancelletto e maggiore di hello? Mom? Kevin's voice was small, ragged. It lacked the venom from our last encounter. He sounded defeated. Kevin, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Why are you calling? We are in trouble. Mom, real trouble. I remained silent. I waited. Brittany lost her job. He said, well, she quit. The manager was toxic, and my hours at the warehouse got cut. We are 2 months behind on rent. The landlord is threatening eviction. A cold part of me wanted to say, that is what happens when you buy luxury handbags instead of paying rent. But the mother in me heard the panic in his voice. And Toby? I asked, is he okay? He is hungry. Mom? Kevin's voice broke. We are rationing formula. The lie was obvious. There were food banks. There was WIC. There were programs. But the image of my grandson going hungry bypassed my logic and struck directly at my heart. What do you want? Kevin, we need help. But, saluting howling, 2 hashes greater than Kevin paused, and the tone shifted slightly. It became less emotional, more transactional. Brittany says we can not just take charity. It hurts her pride. We want to make a deal. Saluting howling, 2 hash is greater than a deal. You want to see Toby, right? You want to be a grandmother? More than anything. I whispered, okay. So here is the thing. We did the math. If you had watched Toby like we asked, we would have saved about $3,000 a month in childcare and lost wages. Since you did not want to put in the time, which is your choice. Saluting howling, 2 hash is greater than we think it is fair that you contribute the equivalent value. I blinked, trying to process his words. You want me to pay you. Saluting howling, 2 hash is greater than to see my grandson. Think of it as a grandmother fee. Kevin said, the words rolling off his tongue smoothly, as if he had rehearsed them. Or a retainer. You pay us $3,000 a month to help with our bills. And in exchange, you get full access. You can visit on weekends. We will bring him over. You can be the doting grandma you want to be. It was extortion. It was emotional blackmail wrapped in a sob story. I knew, rationally, that I should hang up. I should tell him to get a second job. I should tell him that love is not a subscription service. But then I remembered the peeling paint of their apartment complex. I remembered the closed blinds. I remembered the 5 months of silence. I realized that if I said no, they would disappear again. And next time, they might move out of state. I would never see Toby again. They had taken a hostage, and they were naming their price. $3,000. I repeated. It is fair. Kevin insisted. You have the money. Mom, you just bought a new oven for the bakery that cost twice that. Do you care about your ovens more than your family? The manipulation was clumsy, but effective. I looked around my pristine, empty kitchen. I had money. I had assets, but I had no one to share them with. Fine, I said. The word tasted like ash. Really? Kevin sounded surprised, as if he had expected a fight. Yes, I will transfer the money tomorrow morning, but I want to see him this Saturday, and I want him here, at my house, for the whole day. Deal, Kevin said quickly. Thanks. Mom, you are saving us. Really? He hung up without saying, I love you. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank screen of my phone. I had just agreed to purchase a relationship with my own son and grandson. I felt dirty. I felt used. But on Saturday, I would hold Toby. I walked to my desk and opened my checkbook. My hand shook as I wrote out the date. March 15th. I wrote the name, Kevin Bennett. I wrote the amount, $3,000. I tore the check out with a ripping sound that echoed in the quiet room. I told myself I was doing this for the baby. I told myself I was helping them get back on their feet. I was lying to myself. I was not helping them. I was feeding a monster, and I had just given it the first taste of blood. The arrangement began with the sterility of a business transaction. On the 1st of April, I transferred $3,000 to Kevin's bank account. 2 hours later, Brittany dropped Toby off at my front door. For the first few weeks, I was willing to overlook the humiliation of the situation because the reward was so sweet. Toby was a delight. He was learning to sit up, his chubby legs wobbling as he balanced on my living room rug. When he laughed, a bubbling sound that seemed to cleanse the air of the house. I forgot about the money. I forgot about the extortion. I simply let myself be a grandmother. But the peace was fragile, and it was not long before the atmosphere in my house began to shift. It started with the small things, the trivial things. One Tuesday afternoon, Brittany was in the kitchen making a bottle for Toby while I folded laundry in the living room. I had just finished baking a batch of vanilla scones for the shop, and I distinctly remembered turning the oven dial to the off position. I have a habit of checking it twice. It is a baker's instinct, ingrained in me after 20 years of professional kitchen work. An hour later, I walked back into the kitchen and was hit by a wall of heat. The oven was blasting at 400 degrees. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the dial, confused. I reached out and twisted it off, my hand trembling slightly. Brittany walked in, holding Toby on her hip. She stopped, sniffing the air. "Wow, it is hot in here," she said, looking at the oven. "Did you leave that on?" "Laura, Saoting 2 hash is greater than I do not think so," I stammered, doubting myself for the first time. I could have sworn I turned it off. Brittany shifted Toby to her other hip and gave me a look of pity that felt like a slap. "You have been doing that a lot lately," she said softly. "Kevin told me you left the front door unlocked last week, too. Maybe you are just tired." I felt a cold prickle of fear at the base of my neck. I had never left my front door unlocked. I was obsessive about security, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Was I tired? Was I stressed? Or was it something worse? My own mother had succumbed to dementia in her late 60s. The early signs had been just like this: lapses in memory, confusion, denial. The incidents escalated. 3 days later, I could not find my car keys. I always placed them in the crystal bowl on the entryway console. Always. But they were not there. I spent 20 minutes tearing the house apart, sweat beading on my forehead, panic rising in my throat. Finally, Brittany called out from the kitchen. "Laura, are you looking for these?" I ran into the kitchen. She was holding my keys, dangling them from one finger. "Where were they?" I asked, breathless. "In the refrigerator," she said. "Next to the milk." I stared at the keys, horrified. I had no memory of putting them there. My mind was a blank slate. "Mom," Kevin said, walking into the room. He had come to pick up Brittany. He looked at me with deep concern, his brow furrowed. "This is getting dangerous. First the oven, now this. What if you leave the gas on next time? What if you burn the house down while you are sleeping?" I sank onto a kitchen stool, burying my face in my hands. I felt like I was unraveling. The confident businesswoman was gone, replaced by a confused, aging woman who put her keys in the fridge. Maybe you should not be living alone in this big house, Kevin suggested gently. His hand rested on my shoulder. It felt heavy. That evening, they pitched the idea. We have been talking, Kevin said, sitting across from me at the dining table. Brittany and I are worried about you. You seem... Xiao Yu Jing Haoling, deux dièse est supérieur à fragile. And with our financial situation being what it is, maybe there is a solution that helps everyone. What solution? I asked, my voice hollow. We move in, Brittany said. She leaned forward, her eyes bright. Just for a while, we can take the 2 guest rooms upstairs. That way, we are here to help you. We can cook, we can clean, and we can make sure you are safe. And we can rent out our apartment to save money to pay off our debts. It is a win-win. I looked at them. I saw my son looking at me with what I thought was love. I saw my daughter-in-law offering to give up her privacy to care for me. I was scared of my own mind. I was scared of the silence. And mostly, I was scared that if I said no, they would take Toby away again. Okay, I whispered. Okay. They moved in the following weekend. The invasion was swift and absolute. Within 48 hours, the stillness of my home was shattered. The guest bathroom was cluttered with Brittany's cosmetics. The hallway was lined with boxes they never bothered to unpack. The smell of Kevin's cheap body spray lingered in the air. But something did not sit right. The narrative they had spun was that Brittany had found a job at a boutique downtown. She claimed she worked the morning shift, leaving the house at 8 in the morning and returning at 4 in the afternoon. Kevin, meanwhile, was supposedly picking up extra shifts at the warehouse. Yet, my baker's intuition, the gut instinct that told me when the dough was proofed perfectly, was sending me warning signals. It was a Wednesday, 2 weeks after they had moved in. I had left the house at 6 in the morning to open the bakery. Around 11 o'clock, I realized I had left a folder of important tax documents on my desk in the study. I told my assistant manager I would be back in an hour. I drove home, the streets wet with a fresh spring shower. When I pulled into the driveway, I expected the house to be empty. Kevin was at the warehouse. Brittany was at the boutique, but there was a car in the driveway. It was a delivery truck from a high-end department store. The driver was just setting 2 large boxes on the porch. I frowned. I parked my car and walked up the path. The driver nodded at me and left. I looked at the labels on the boxes. They were addressed to Brittany Bennett. I unlocked the front door quietly. I did not call out. The house was silent, but it was not empty. I could hear the faint sound of the television coming from the master bedroom. My bedroom. Wait, why were they in my bedroom? I crept up the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears. I had given them the guest rooms. My room was off limits. The door to the master suite was ajar. I pushed it open, inches at a time. There, lying in the center of my king-size bed, was Brittany. She was not at work. She was not toiling away at a boutique to help her family. She was wearing a silk robe, my silk robe, and eating grapes from a bowl balanced on her stomach. She was watching a reality show on the television, laughing into her phone, which was pressed to her ear. I cannot believe he bought it. She was saying into the phone, "Yeah, the idiot sent the money. No, I am not working. Are you kidding?" I told them I have a shift from 8 to 4 so I can just drive around, get coffee, and shop. It is the perfect setup. I froze. The blood in my veins turned to ice. Yeah, she continued, oblivious to my presence. The old hag thinks she is losing her mind. Kevin moved my keys into the fridge the other day, and she totally panicked. It was hilarious. We are going to have power of attorney by Christmas if we keep this up. My knees buckled. I had to grab the door frame to keep from falling. It was all a lie. The oven, the keys, the concern. They were gaslighting me. My own son and his wife were systematically trying to make me believe I was insane so they could take control of my life. I stepped back, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rush in there and drag her out of my bed by her hair. But a voice in my head, cold, sharp, and calculating, stopped me. If I confronted her now, she would deny it. She would spin it. She would tell Kevin I was hallucinating. Or worse, they would take Toby and disappear forever. I needed proof. I needed to be smarter than them. I quietly backed away from the door. I tiptoed down the stairs, every creak of the floorboards sounding like a gunshot to my heightened senses. I went to the kitchen. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold a glass of water. I looked out the window at the recycling bin on the side of the house. It was overflowing. I walked outside. I lifted the lid of the blue bin. It was filled with evidence. Empty boxes from luxury online retailers, receipts for spa treatments, wrappers from expensive sushi takeout, and buried at the bottom, a receipt from a hardware store for a duplicate set of house keys, dated 3 days before my keys went missing. They were not poor, they were parasites. I stood there in the drizzle, looking at the trash that defined my son's life. The grief was overwhelming, a physical weight that threatened to crush me. I had mourned the loss of my connection with Kevin for years, but this was different. This was the death of his character. I wiped the rain from my face. My expression hardened. The trembling in my hands stopped. I went back inside and grabbed the tax folder I had come for. I did not go upstairs. I did not confront Brittany. I drove back to the bakery. I sat in my office, staring at the wall for a long time. Then, I picked up the phone. I did not call Kevin. I did not call the police. I called a private security company. I need a camera system, I said, my voice steady and cold. Hidden cameras in every room, and I need them installed tomorrow when the house is empty. I was done being the victim. If they wanted to play a game of deception, I would show them how a master played. The house was no longer mine. It had become a host organism, and my son and his wife were the virus that had hijacked its cellular structure. The transformation was not subtle. It was violent in its speed and total in its scope. The silence I had once cherished was replaced by a constant, low-level thrum of noise. The television in the living room was never turned off, blaring reality shows and cartoons at a volume that made the crystal glasses in the china cabinet vibrate. The air, once scented with lavender and freshly baked bread, now hung heavy with the odor of stale pizza boxes, damp towels, and the cloying sweetness of Brittany's cheap vanilla body spray. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, observing the decay of my sanctuary. The coup began on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after I had installed the hidden cameras. I was in the kitchen, scrubbing dried egg yolk off a plate that had been left on the coffee table overnight. Kevin walked in, holding a tape measure. He did not look at me. He looked at the refrigerator, then at the door frame, measuring the space with a frown. "Mom, we need to switch rooms," he said, I stopped scrubbing. The water ran cold over my hands. "Excuse me? The guest rooms upstairs are too small," he said, snapping the tape measure back into its casing. "Toby is starting to crawl. He needs space. And Brittany is feeling claustrophobic. We need the master suite." I turned off the faucet slowly. My master suite was my refuge. It was the only room in the house where I still felt like Laura Bennett, the woman who built a business, not the unpaid maid I had become. It had my reading nook, my soaking tub, and the bay window where I watched the sunrise. "Kevin, that is my room," I said, keeping my voice level. "There are 2 other bedrooms on that floor. They are cramped." "Mom!" Kevin's voice rose, the familiar whine creeping in. "Plus, the master bath has the jacuzzi tub. Brittany has a bad back from carrying the baby all day. She needs it for therapy. She does not carry the baby all day." I thought, "I do." I looked at him. I saw the defiance in his eyes, the dare. He was waiting for me to say no so he could accuse me of not caring about his wife's health or his son's development. He was waiting to pull the lever that would cut off my access to Toby. "Where would I sleep?" I asked. "The attic room is nice." He shrugged. "It is cozy. And you are barely home anyway with the bakery." The attic was a finished storage space on the 3rd floor. It had a single small window and sloped ceilings that made it impossible to stand up straight near the walls. It was a room for old yearbooks and winter coats, not for a 48-year-old woman with dignity. But I remembered the cameras. I remembered the conversation I had overheard in my bedroom. "We are going to have power of attorney by Christmas." If I fought him now, the tension would explode before I had enough evidence to destroy them completely. I needed them to feel comfortable. I needed them to feel like they had won. "Fine," I said, drying my hands on a dish towel. "If it helps Toby." "Is ran this?" Kevin did not say thank you. He just nodded, as if I had finally acknowledged a basic fact of the universe. "Cool. We will move your stuff up today." By evening, I was exiled. My clothes were shoved into plastic bins and dragged up the narrow staircase to the attic. My king-size bed was stripped and remade with Brittany's leopard print sheets. I stood in the doorway of the attic, looking at my new reality. A twin mattress on a metal frame. A single lamp. It felt like a cell, and in a way, it was. I was a prisoner in my own home, serving a sentence for a crime I did not commit. The days blurred into a humiliating routine. I would wake up at 5 in the morning, creeping down the creaky stairs to start the coffee. If the pot was not ready when Kevin woke up at 10, he would sigh loudly, a sound that conveyed deep disappointment in my competence. I became the invisible engine of their comfort. I did the laundry, separating their delicates from their denim, only to have Brittany complain that I had used the wrong fabric softener. I cooked dinner every night. Roast chicken, beef stew, vegetable lasagna, using ingredients I paid for. They would eat in front of the television, leaving their plates on the floor for me to collect. They never asked about my day. They never asked about the bakery. To them, I was not a person. I was a resource. I was an ATM that also knew how to iron shirts. The isolation was the next step in their strategy. One evening, my phone rang while I was clearing the table. It was Sarah, my best friend and the manager at the bakery. I reached for the phone, but Brittany snatched it off the counter. "Oh, it is just work," Brittany said, silencing the call. "You should not answer it. Laura, you are already so stressed. Doctor's orders. Remember, I do not have a doctor," I said, reaching for the device. "And I need to talk to Sarah, Kevin stepped between me and Brittany. Mom, stop being difficult. We are trying to protect you. You have been so forgetful lately. The stress of the business is making your condition worse. We told Sarah you are taking a sabbatical for your health. My blood ran cold. You told my employees what? That you are sick, Kevin said, his face a mask of faux concern. That you are having Sauting 2 dièse est supérieur à épisode. We told them not to bother you with work stuff. We are handling it. They were cutting the lines. They were severing my connection to the outside world so that when the time came to declare me incompetent, there would be no one left to defend me. Give me my phone, Kevin, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. He looked at me with a terrifying coldness. No, you need to rest. Go upstairs. Mom, take a nap. You look tired. I retreated, not because I was weak, but because I knew that if I stayed in that kitchen, I would pick up the cast iron skillet and do something that would send me to prison. I went up to my attic cell. I sat on the edge of the twin mattress, listening to them laugh downstairs. The sound was muffled, distorted by the floorboards, like demons cackling under the earth. 2 days later, the financial dam broke. I was in the living room, dusting around the collection of beer bottles Kevin had left on the mantel. When he walked in, he was holding a piece of paper. It was a bill from the nursing home where my own mother had spent her final years. A bill I had paid off long ago. He must have found it in my old files. We need to talk about the finances, Kevin said, sitting in my favorite wingback chair, the one I was no longer allowed to sit in because Brittany said I shed hair on the upholstery. What about them? I asked. Brittany and I are looking at the household expenses, he said, waving the paper vaguely. It is a lot to manage. The mortgage, the utilities, the groceries. Since we are taking care of you now, we think it makes sense for us to be added to your bank accounts. Joint access? Just to streamline things. I griped the duster so hard my knuckles turned white. You want access to my business accounts? And your personal ones, he added. It is just easier. Mom, you forgot to pay the water bill last month. Remember? I had not forgotten. Brittany had hidden the bill in the pantry behind the cereal boxes. I found it 2 days ago. I am not adding you to my accounts. Kevin, I said firmly. Kevin's face darkened. He stood up, throwing the paper on the floor. Why are you so greedy? He shouted. His sudden explosion of temper made me flinch. I am not being greedy, I said. I am being prudent. Prudent? You call it prudent to hoard your money while your family suffers. Kevin paced the room, his hands balling into fists. I know about the money you gave Mark. I saw the records. You gave him $50,000 for his startup. $50,000. That was a loan. Kevin, I said quietly, and he paid every cent back. I do not care. Kevin roared. He kicked the ottoman, sending it skidding across the room. You gave him a chance. You believed in him. But me? You treat me like a loser. You make me beg for every dime. You are living in my house, rent-free. Kevin, I am feeding you. I am cleaning up after you. That is the least you can do. He screamed, his face inches from mine. Spittle flew from his mouth. You owe me this. You owe me for being a terrible mother. You were always working. You were always at that stupid bakery. Mark was the golden boy, and I was just the mistake who came later. The words hung in the air, vibrating with hatred. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who was currently wearing a designer watch I knew he had bought with my grandmother fee. Is that what you think? I asked softly, That I owe you? Yes. He hissed. You owe me everything. And since you are losing your mind anyway, I am just taking what is mine before you forget where you put it. He stormed out of the room, bumping my shoulder hard enough to make me stumble. I stood alone in the wreckage of my living room. My shoulder throbbed. My heart felt like it had been carved out with a melon baller, leaving nothing but a hollow, aching cavity. He did not love me. He did not even like me. He saw me as a vessel of assets to be stripped and discarded. The entitlement was not just a character flaw. It was a pathology. He truly believed that my labor, my success, and my home were his birthright. I walked over to the ottoman and pushed it back into place. I picked up the paper he had thrown on the floor. I went upstairs to the attic. I pulled a small burner phone from underneath a loose floorboard in the corner, a precaution I had taken the day I hired the security company. I dialed the number for Davis, my attorney. It is Laura, I said when he answered. We need to move up the timeline. They are getting impatient. I am ready when you are. Laura, Davis said. His voice was a lifeline of sanity. Do you have the evidence? I looked at the small monitor hidden in my knitting bag, showing the live feed from the living room. Brittany was currently digging through my purse, pulling out cash. I have everything, I said. My voice was cold. It lacked the tremor of a mother's grief. It was the voice of a chief executive officer executing a hostile takeover defense. Let them think they have won. Davis, let them think I am broken. Because when I strike, I want them to never see it coming. I hung up the phone and hid it back under the floorboard. Then, I went downstairs to start dinner. Kevin wanted meatloaf. I would make him the best meatloaf he had ever tasted. I would serve it with a smile. I would feed the beast until it was fat, slow, and ready for the slaughter. The explosion did not happen with a bang. It happened with a spill. It was a Thursday evening, stifling and humid. The kind of weather that makes your clothes stick to your skin and your temper shorten by the minute. I had spent the entire day on my feet at the bakery, dealing with a supplier who had delivered 50 pounds of rancid flour. My back ached with a dull, throbbing rhythm. My head felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. All I wanted was to come home, sit in my kitchen with a glass of cold water, and enjoy 10 minutes of silence. Instead, I walked into a frat house. Kevin and 3 of his friends, young men with patchy beards and eyes glazed over from too much cannabis, were sprawled across my living room furniture. The air was thick with smoke. Despite my strict rule against smoking inside, beer bottles cluttered the coffee table, leaving wet rings on the antique mahogany surface I had spent years polishing. Brittany was nowhere to be seen, likely upstairs in my bed, shopping online. I stood in the entryway, my purse heavy on my shoulder. No one looked up. No one acknowledged the woman who paid the mortgage on the roof over their heads. Then, it happened. One of Kevin's friends, a boy named Travis, who always looked at me with a sneer, gestured wildly with his hands while telling a story. In his excitement, his arm struck a glass of red wine sitting precariously on the armrest of the sofa. The glass tipped. Gravity did the rest. I watched in slow motion as the dark crimson liquid splashed across the beige silk upholstery of the sofa, a piece I had imported from Italy 10 years ago. It soaked into the fabric instantly, spreading like a fresh wound. Oops, Travis said. He laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Kevin laughed too. Dude, you are a mess, he said. Not even glancing at the stain, something inside me snapped. It was not a physical sound, but I felt it, a tether, frayed by months of abuse and disrespect, finally severed. Get out, I said. My voice was low, trembling with a rage so pure it felt cold. The laughter died down. Kevin turned his head slowly to look at me. What? I dropped my purse on the floor. I said, get out, all of you. Travis, get out of my house. Kevin, tell your friends to leave. Now, Kevin rolled his eyes. Mom, relax. It is just a stain. We will flip the cushion. I am not relaxing, I screamed. The volume of my own voice shocked me. It ripped through the smoky haze of the room. I am done. Kevin, I am done with the disrespect. I am done with the filth. I am done with being a prisoner in my own home. I want everyone out. Now, Travis and the other friends exchanged awkward glances. They scrambled up, grabbing their jackets, mumbling apologies that sounded as hollow as their heads. Within 30 seconds, the front door clicked shut, leaving me alone with my son. Kevin stood up. He loomed over me, his face flushing a dark, ugly red. He did not look embarrassed. He looked furious. You embarrassed me, he spat. You embarrassed yourself? I countered, stepping toward him. I was shaking, but I did not back down. Look at this house. Kevin, look at what you have done to it. You treat me like a servant. You steal my money. You lie to me. I do not steal your money, he shouted. I know about the credit cards. I yelled back. I know about the gambling debts. I know Brittany is not working. I know everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Kevin stared at me, his mouth slightly open. For a moment, I thought I saw fear, but it was quickly replaced by something far more dangerous. Malice. So, he said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. So what if you know? What are you going to do about it? You are a lonely old woman. Laura, you have no one but us. I have my dignity, I said, and I want you out. By the end of the week, you and Brittany, pack your things. I am cutting you off. Kevin laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound. You cannot kick us out. We have rights. We have established residency. I will evict you. I said, I will call the sheriff. Kevin took a step closer. He picked up a crystal vase from the side table. A gift from my late husband. He weighed it in his hand. His eyes locked on mine. Then he opened his fingers. The vase hit the hardwood floor and shattered into 1,000 glittering shards. Oops, he said, mocking his friend. My hand slipped, just like your mind is slipping. Mom, I stared at the broken glass, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was violence. This was a threat. Before I could speak, I heard slow clapping from the stairs. I looked up. Brittany was descending, step by step, like a queen greeting her subjects. She was holding Toby in one arm and her smartphone in the other. The camera lens was pointed directly at me. Bravo, Laura, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Quite a performance. Screaming at your son, threatening to throw your grandson onto the street. Put the phone away. Brittany, I said. Oh, I do not think so. She smiled. This is insurance. She reached the bottom of the stairs and walked over to Kevin. They stood together, a united front of entitlement and cruelty. You are not kicking us out, Brittany said calmly. In fact, if you try to file for eviction, or if you try to cut off the money, we will make a phone call. To who? I asked. To Adult Protective Services, she said. and to Child Protective Services. I frowned. What are you talking about? Brittany shifted Toby on her hip. She pulled up the sleeve of his onesie. On his upper arm, there was a small, faint bruise. It looked like a pinch mark. Toby fell against the crib yesterday, she said casually. But if we tell the social worker that Grandma did it, Sao Yu Ting Hao Ling, Tuhash is greater than, well, who do you think they will believe? The young, struggling parents? Or the aging woman who has been forgetting to turn off the oven and screaming at invisible people? My blood ran cold. You would not, we would... Kevin interrupted. He stepped forward, crunching the glass shards under his boots. We will tell them you are violent. We will tell them you have dementia. We will show them the videos of you looking confused. Videos we have been staging for months. Brittany nodded. We have a compelling case. Laura, we can have you declared incompetent. We can have you placed in a state-run facility. I hear Shady Acres has a bed open. It smells like urine and boiled cabbage. But I am sure you will get used to it. I stared at them in horror. This was not just greed. This was evil. They were threatening to take my freedom, my reputation, and my life, just to keep their access to my bank account. They were willing to frame me for child abuse, a stain that would never wash off. And the terrifying part was, they could do it. The system was broken. If they played the victim card well enough, if they used the confused old lady narrative they had been planting with the neighbors and the police, I could lose everything. I felt the walls closing in. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I looked at Toby, innocent and wide-eyed, held captive by a mother who used him as a pawn. I realized then that I was not dealing with family. I was dealing with predators, and you cannot reason with a predator. You can only kill it. Something inside me shifted. The fear that had been paralyzing me condensed into a hard, cold knot in the pit of my stomach. The mother who wanted to save her son died in that moment. In her place, a strategist was born. If I fought them now, openly, I would lose. They had the element of surprise. They had the baby. I needed time. I needed to lure them into a false sense of security. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumble into a mask of defeat. I forced tears into my eyes. Please, I whispered, my voice shaking. Please do not take me away. Sao Yu Ting Ha Ling. Tuhash is greater than I did not mean it. I am just tired. I am so confused lately. Kevin and Brittany exchanged a look of triumph. The tension in the room broke. They had won, or so they thought. That is better, Kevin said, patting my cheek. His hand felt like a branding iron. We do not want to hurt you, Mom. We just want what is best for the family. Now, clean up this glass. Someone could get hurt. Brittany smirked and turned back to the stairs. Make sure you cook something nice for dinner. Laura, all this drama has made me hungry. They walked away. They left me standing in the wreckage of my living room, surrounded by beer bottles and broken crystal. I knelt down and began to pick up the shards of glass. One sharp piece sliced into my finger. A drop of bright red blood welled up. I watched it drip onto the floor, mixing with the wine stain. I did not feel the pain. I felt clarity. They thought I was broken. They thought I was a senile old woman they could bully into submission. They had made the classic mistake of the arrogant. They underestimated their opponent. I was not just a grandmother. I was a business owner who had survived recessions, lawsuits, and competitors. I knew how to play the long game. I looked at the camera hidden in the smoke detector above me. I knew it had recorded everything. The threat, the blackmail, the shattered vase. I wiped the blood from my finger. You want to play dirty? I thought, my inner voice sounding like the strike of a match against a rough surface. Fine, let us play. I would give them everything they wanted. I would sign their papers. I would let them think they owned me. I would fatten them up with confidence and greed. And then, when they were standing on the trap door, smiling and counting their money, I would pull the lever. I stood up, holding the shards of glass in my palm. The point of no return had been crossed, but they were the ones who were lost. The following week was a masterclass in submission. I moved through my own house like a specter, a ghost, haunting the hallways of a life that used to belong to me. I shuffled when I walked. I deliberately let my hands tremble when I poured their coffee. I asked them to repeat simple sentences, feigning the confusion they so desperately wanted to see. It worked. Their vigilance began to slip. The predator does not fear the wounded gazelle. It pities it, and in that pity, it becomes careless. It was a Friday evening in late May. The air was thick with the promise of summer, heavy with pollen and humidity. Kevin and Brittany were preparing for a night out. They called it a networking event, claiming Kevin had a lead on a management position at a logistics firm. I knew better. I had seen the charges on my credit card statement earlier that day. 2 tickets to a very important person concert experience at the Climate Pledge Arena, costing $400 each. I sat in the kitchen, staring at a bowl of lukewarm oatmeal. Brittany breezed in, a cloud of expensive perfume trailing behind her. She was wearing a dress I recognized. It was a vintage silk slip dress I had bought in Paris 20 years ago. It hung loosely on her frame, the hem dragging slightly on the floor. Seeing her in my clothes was a violation that made my skin crawl, but I kept my face blank. Here, Laura, she said, placing a steaming mug of herbal tea in front of me. Drink this. It will help you sleep. You have been so agitated lately. Thank you, dear, I whispered, my voice raspy. You are so good to me. She patted my shoulder, her acrylic nails digging slightly into my skin. We just want you to rest. Do not wait up. We will be late. Kevin entered the room, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the microwave. He looked handsome, in a superficial way, but his eyes were shifting, restless. He refused to look at me directly. Bye, Mom, he mumbled. Do not burn the house down. They left in a flurry of laughter and clicking heels. I listened to the sound of my car, which they had commandeered, backing out of the driveway. I waited until the engine noise faded into the distance. Then, I waited 5 minutes more, counting the seconds by the rhythmic dripping of the kitchen faucet. When I was certain they were gone, I stood up. I poured the herbal tea down the sink. The brown liquid swirled away, carrying with it whatever chemical cocktail they were using to sedate me. I did not need sedation. I needed adrenaline. I walked to the stairs. My posture straightened. The shuffle disappeared. I ascended the steps 2 at a time, moving with the silent purpose of a woman who has nothing left to lose. I reached the door of the master bedroom. My bedroom. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. A cloying mixture of stale sweat, unwashed laundry, and that overpowering vanilla body spray. The room was unrecognizable. My pristine sanctuary, once decorated in calming shades of cream and sage, looked like a frat house after a particularly rowdy weekend. Clothes were strewn everywhere, plates with crusty remnants of food balanced on the nightstands. My vanity, where I used to keep my grandmother's silver brush set, was covered in sticky makeup spills and empty energy drink cans. I felt a surge of nausea, but I pushed it down. I was not here to clean. I was here to dig. I began with the closet. I rifled through the pockets of Kevin's jeans, finding nothing but crumpled receipts for fast food and lottery tickets. I checked the shoeboxes stacked in the corner. Nothing. I moved to the nightstand on Kevin's side of the bed. I pulled open the drawer. It was filled with chargers, loose change, and a few prescription bottles. I picked one up. Alprazolam, Xanax, prescribed to Brittany Bennett. I picked up another. Zolpidem, Ambien. I stared at the bottles. These were potent sedatives. Sedatives that, if crushed and mixed into tea, would cause memory loss, confusion, and lethargy. The dementia they were gaslighting me into believing was not a disease of the mind. It was a poisoning of the blood. My hands shook, not with fear, but with a cold and hard rage. They were drugging me. My own son was chemically restraining me to steal my inheritance, but I needed more. I needed the motive. Greed was powerful, but this level of desperation suggested something else. I looked under the bed. There, shoved against the wall, was a metal lockbox. It was the kind you buy at an office supply store. Sturdy, fireproof, and locked. I did not have the key. I did not need one. I went to the garage and returned with a heavy flathead screwdriver and a hammer. I sat on the floor of my defiled bedroom and wedged the screwdriver into the seam of the box. I hammered the end of the handle. 1 blow, 2 blows. The metal groaned. With a final, violent crack, the latch gave way. I opened the lid. Inside was a chaotic mess of papers, rubber-banded stacks of letters, and a flash drive. I picked up the first stack of papers. They were notices from a collection agency. Final notice. Past due. Immediate legal action. The sums were staggering. $10,000. $15,000. I dug deeper. I found printouts from an online gambling website. The username was K-Bennett-wins. The irony was sickening. The transaction history showed page after page of losses. Blackjack, poker, sports betting. The total losses over the last 2 years amounted to over $120,000. My son was not just bad with money. He was a degenerate gambler. He had gambled away his future, his wife's savings, and now he was gambling away my life. But near the bottom of the box, I found a manila envelope that looked different. It was not a bill. It was a medical document. The return address was a genetic testing laboratory in Seattle. I opened the envelope. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silent house. I pulled out the single sheet of paper. Paternity test results. Alleged father, Kevin Bennett. Child, Tobias Bennett. Probability of paternity, 0%. I read it again. 0%. The room seemed to spin. I sat back against the bed frame, gasping for air. Toby, my sweet, laughing grandson. The only reason I had allowed these monsters back into my life was not my blood. He was not Kevin's son, but that was not the tragedy. Infidelity happens. Marriages break. The tragedy was in the next piece of paper I found clipped to the test results. It was a printout of an email chain between Kevin and Brittany, dated 6 months ago, before they had come to my door with the baby. From Brittany to Kevin. Subject: the plan. Kevin, stop freaking out. I know he is not yours. You knew that when you married me, but your mother does not know. If we play this right, That baby is our golden ticket. We use him to get back into the house. She is obsessed with being a grandma. We milk the guilt. We get the grandmother fee. And we use the money to pay off the sharks. Once she signs over the house, it does not matter whose kid he is. From Kevin to Brittany. Subject: regarding the plan. Are you sure she will buy it? She is sharp. From Brittany to Kevin. Subject: regarding the plan. She is old and lonely. We will make her doubt her mind. A little crushed Ambien in her tea. A few misplaced keys. Saoi Jing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than she will be signing that power of attorney before Toby's first birthday. Just stick to the script. I dropped the papers. I felt like I had been hollowed out. It was not just Brittany manipulating Kevin. It was a partnership, a conspiracy. My son knew. He knew the child was not his. Yet he had held that baby in my face. Used my love for an innocent child as a lever to pry open my bank accounts. He had looked me in the eye, accepted my money, and then gone into the kitchen to drug my tea. He did not love me. He did not even view me as human. I was just an obstacle between him and his gambling debts. I looked at the photo of Kevin on the nightstand, a picture of him from high school, smiling, wearing his football jersey. I remembered driving him to practice. I remembered cheering for him in the rain. I remembered holding him when he cried after his first breakup. That boy was dead. The thing that was living in my house, wearing his face, was a monster. I sat there for a long time as the sun went down, casting long, dark shadows across the room. The grief I felt was physical. It was a sharp pain in my chest, a constriction of my throat. I wept. I wept for the grandson I never really had. I wept for the son I had lost years ago. I wept for the woman I had been, naive, hopeful, desperate for connection. But as the tears dried, something else took their place. It was a coldness, a stillness like the surface of a frozen lake. I gathered the papers. I gathered the pill bottles. I gathered the flash drive. I put them all into a canvas tote bag I had brought with me. I stood up. I walked to the bathroom and washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, but they were clear. The fog of the drugs had lifted. The fog of maternal denial had burned away. I was no longer Laura, the mother. I was Laura, the executioner. I returned to the bedroom. I placed the lockbox back under the bed, arranging it carefully so it looked untouched. I smoothed the duvet. I tried to recreate the chaos I had found. Then, I went upstairs to my attic cell. I lay down on the lumpy mattress, staring at the sloped ceiling. I held the tote bag against my chest. It contained the ammunition I needed to destroy them, but I could not use it yet. The confrontation had to be public. It had to be legal, and it had to be absolute. I waited for the sound of the car returning. It was 2 a.m. when they stumbled in, drunk and loud. I heard Kevin retching in the bathroom. I heard Brittany cursing at him. I closed my eyes and smiled in the darkness. Sleep well, my son, I thought. Enjoy your last nights of freedom, because the bill is coming due, and I am going to charge you interest. The morning of the signing arrived with a suffocating grayness, the kind of heavy, static atmosphere that usually precedes a violent summer storm. The air inside my house was not much better. It was charged with a frantic, manic energy. Kevin and Brittany were vibrating with anticipation, moving through the rooms like vultures circling a dying animal that was taking just a little too long to expire. I sat on the edge of my mattress in the attic, listening to them downstairs. They were moving furniture. They were setting the stage. Today was the day they believed they would inherit the kingdom. My hands were folded in my lap. They were steady. My heart was beating a slow, rhythmic war drum against my ribs. I had spent the last 3 nights awake, reviewing every angle, every legal loophole, and every frame of footage I had collected. I had spoken to Davis, my attorney, on the burner phone until the battery died. We were ready. The plan was simple. Let them think they had won until the ink was hovering over the paper. Then burn their world to the ground. At 10 o'clock sharp, Kevin came up the stairs. He was wearing a suit I had bought him for his cousin's wedding 3 years ago. It was tight across the shoulders now, straining against the bulk he had gained from a diet of beer and fast food. He had slicked his hair back with too much gel. He looked like a caricature of a businessman, a child playing dress-up in his father's closet. "Mom," he said, his voice sickly sweet. "It is time. Mr. Henderson is here." I looked up at him, blinking slowly. "Who is Mr. Henderson?" I asked, slurring my words slightly. "He is the lawyer." "Mom," Kevin said, his patience already fraying at the edges. "The nice man who is going to help us manage the bills. Remember? We talked about this. You are going to sign the papers so Brittany and I can take care of you." "Oh," I whispered. "The papers. Right, come on." Kevin reached out and grabbed my arm. His grip was firm, bordering on painful. He hauled me up as if I were a sack of flour. I let my weight sag against him, playing the part of the frail. Confused and valid, we descended the stairs. The living room had been transformed. The coffee table, the one with the wine stain, had been cleared and polished. A vase of fresh flowers, likely bought with my credit card, sat in the center. Brittany was seated on the sofa, wearing a modest navy blue dress that covered her tattoos. She looked demure. She looked like a concerned daughter-in-law. Sitting opposite her was Mr. Henderson. He was a small, oily man with a comb-over and a suit that looked like it had been slept in. I knew his type. He was a strip mall lawyer who chased ambulances and facilitated questionable estate transfers for a flat fee. "Laura," Brittany cooed, standing up to guide me to the armchair. "You look Saoitsing 2 hashes greater than rested. Come sit. Mr. Henderson has everything ready." I sat down. The leather felt cold against my legs. I looked around the room, letting my eyes dart nervously from face to face. "Is Toby here?" I asked. "He is in the playpen," Brittany said quickly, dismissing my concern. "Focus." "Laura." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He shuffled a stack of documents on the table. "Good morning, Mrs. Bennett. I understand you have been having some health issues. Memory loss? Confusion?" I looked at Kevin. He nodded encouragingly. "Tell him." "Mom, Saoitsing 2 hashes greater than I forget things." I stammered. "I left the oven on. I put the keys in the fridge." "Exactly," Mr. Henderson said, tapping a pen against his clipboard. "That is why your son and daughter-in-law have petitioned for this durable power of attorney. It gives them full control over your assets, your property, and your medical decisions. It is for your own safety." He slid a thick document toward me. It was dense with legal jargon, but I knew exactly what it said. It said that upon signing, Laura Bennett effectively ceased to exist as an independent entity. It said Kevin Bennett could sell my house, liquidate my bakery, and put me in a state-run facility whenever he chose. "Just sign right here." "Mom," Kevin said, pointing to a line at the bottom of the page marked with a sticky tab. Then we can have lunch. I ordered that Italian food you like. He uncapped a heavy fountain pen and pressed it into my hand. I looked at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc. My husband's pen. Kevin must have stolen it from my desk. The sight of that pen, an object of dignity and hard work, being used to sign away my life, triggered a flash of genuine anger. But I forced it down. I leaned forward. My hand trembled. I brought the nib of the pen down to the paper. Kevin held his breath. I could hear the whistle of air in his nose. Brittany leaned forward, her eyes wide and predatory. Mr. Henderson looked bored, checking his watch. I wrote the letter L, then I stopped. Mom? Kevin urged. Keep going. Laura Bennett. Saouding Haling. 2 hashes greater than. I do not feel well. I said, dropping the pen. It rolled across the document, leaving a splatter of black ink. Kevin groaned. God. Mom, pick it up. Just sign the damn paper. Kevin, Mr. Henderson warned. Let her take a breath. I need water, I whispered. Please. Brittany rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might detach. I will get it, she snapped. She marched into the kitchen. I sat there, rubbing my temples. Kevin was pacing behind the sofa, muttering curses under his breath. The tension in the room was a physical weight. They were so close. They could taste the money. Brittany returned with a glass of water. Here, she said, thrusting it at me. Drink, then sign. I took the glass. I took a small sip. Then I set it down on the coaster. Actually, I said, my voice changed. The tremor was gone. The slur was gone. The confusion evaporated like mist under the morning sun. I sat up straight, squaring my shoulders. I looked directly at Mr. Henderson, my eyes sharp and clear. Actually, I have a few questions about paragraph 4, section C, regarding the liquidation of business assets. The room went silent. Absolute, dead silence. Kevin stopped pacing. Brittany froze. Mr. Henderson blinked, looking at me with sudden confusion. Excuse me? Mr. Henderson asked. I picked up the document and flipped the page with a steady hand. The clause stating that the agent, my son, has the right to sell commercial property without independent appraisal. That seems reckless, does it not? Especially given his credit history. Mom? Kevin whispered. He looked terrified. What? Saouding Haoling. 2 hashes greater than. What are you doing? I am reading the contract. Kevin, I said coldly, something you clearly did not do. Or you would know that this document is riddled with errors. Brittany stepped forward, her face flushing red. She is having an episode. She does not know what she is saying. She is lucid dreaming or something. Just make her sign it. Before Kevin could move, the doorbell rang. It was not a polite ring. It was a long, insistent press. Who is that? Kevin asked, panic rising in his voice. We are not expecting anyone. I stood up. I walked past a stunned Brittany and opened the front door. Standing on the porch was Davis, my attorney, looking impeccable in a charcoal suit. Behind him stood 2 uniformed police officers and a plainclothes detective. Mr. Davis? Kevin stammered from the living room. What are you doing here? I invited him, I said, stepping aside to let them in. The police officers filed into the hallway. The living room suddenly felt very small. Mr. Henderson began to pack his briefcase with frantic speed. What is going on? Brittany shrieked. Why are the police here? I walked over to the television console. I picked up the remote. I think we should watch a movie, I said. I pressed the power button. The 60-inch screen flickered to life. I had already connected the flash drive to the input. The video started. It was grainy black and white footage from a night vision camera. The date stamp in the corner read, May 14th, 8:45 p.m. On the screen, Brittany stood in my kitchen. She looked over her shoulder, ensuring she was alone. Then, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a prescription bottle. She crushed a blue pill on the counter using the back of a spoon. She swept the powder into a mug of steaming tea. Kevin walked into the frame a moment later. "Did you put enough in?" the on-screen Kevin asked. "Yeah." The on-screen Brittany replied. "She will be out cold in 20 minutes. Then we can look for the bank statements." "Good," Kevin said. "The old hag is getting suspicious. We need to speed this up." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the living room was heavier than anything I had ever experienced. It was the silence of a tomb. I looked at Kevin. All the blood had drained from his face. He looked like a corpse standing upright. Brittany was shaking, her hands covering her mouth. "That is so yu ting hao ling. 2 hashes greater than that is fake," Brittany screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the TV. "That is a deep fake. She made it with artificial intelligence?" Mrs. Bennett, the detective said, stepping forward. "Is this the footage you submitted to our office this morning?" "Yes, detective," I said, along with the toxicology report from my doctor confirming the presence of zolpidem and alprazolam in my bloodstream, drugs I was never prescribed. Mr. Henderson stood up. "I am leaving," he announced. "I was not aware of these circumstances. I am recusing myself immediately." He practically ran out the door, leaving his clients to the wolves. Kevin looked at the police, then at me. "Mom, please. It was just to help you sleep. You were so stressed." "We were trying to help." "Stop it, Kevin," I said. My voice was low and lethal. "Just stop." I reached into the tote bag I had placed by the chair earlier. I pulled out the manila envelope. "I have one more thing," I said. I walked over to Kevin. He flinched as if I were going to hit him. I did not hit him. I handed him the paternity test. "What is this?" he whispered. "Sao yu jing hao ling. 2 hashes greater than read it." He opened the paper. His eyes scanned the lines. I watched the realization hit him. I watched his world disintegrate. 0%. I said. Kevin looked up at Brittany. He looked at the woman he had conspired with. The woman he had betrayed his mother for. "He is not mine?" Kevin's voice was a broken croak. "Toby is not mine?" Brittany's face hardened. She stopped shaking. The mask fell away completely, revealing the cold, calculating narcissist beneath. "So what?" she spat. "Does it matter? We are married. Kevin, he is your son on the birth certificate." "You knew," Kevin whispered. He dropped the paper. "You knew the whole time." "Of course I knew," Brittany yelled. "You think I got pregnant by a loser who works in a warehouse? Toby's father is a managing partner at a law firm. He pays me $5,000 a month to keep my mouth shut." The room erupted. Kevin lunged at Brittany. The police officers moved instantly, grabbing Kevin by the arms and slamming him against the wall. "Get off me," Kevin screamed, thrashing against the officers. "She is a liar. She is a whore," Brittany was screaming back, hurling insults that would make a sailor blush. The baby, Toby, began to wail from the playpen, a terrified, lonely sound that cut through the chaos. I stood in the center of the storm, perfectly still. I watched the police handcuff my son. I watched them handcuff my daughter-in-law, Kevin Bennett and Brittany Bennett. The detective recited, his voice calm and authoritative. You are under arrest for elder abuse, poisoning, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. You have the right to remain silent. Mom, Kevin screamed as they dragged him toward the door. Mom, tell them to stop. I did not know about the baby. She tricked me to. Mom, please. I looked at him. I looked at the tears streaming down his face. They were real tears this time. Tears of fear. Tears of a child who realizes the safety net is gone. But I felt nothing. The well of maternal mercy had run dry. I did not trick you into drugging me. Kevin, I said quietly, I did not trick you into stealing my money. You did those things because you are weak, and because you are greedy. Mom, he wailed, his voice cracking as they pushed him through the doorway. I turned my back on him. I walked over to the playpen. I looked down at Toby, the poor, innocent child who had been used as a bargaining chip, a hostage, and a weapon. He reached up to me with chubby arms, his face wet with tears. My heart ached for him, but I knew I could not keep him. He was not my blood, and more importantly, he was the son of a monster. If I kept him, Brittany would always be in my life. She would use him to torment me from prison. She would use him to drain me until I died. I looked at the detective. Call Child Protective Services, I said, and call the biological father listed in Brittany's phone. I want this child removed from my home. Are you sure, Mrs. Bennett? The detective asked gently. I looked at the empty space where my family used to be. I am sure, I said. The police led Brittany out. She did not scream for mercy. She glared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You will die alone. Laura, she hissed as she passed. You will rot in this big house and no one will find you for weeks. I met her gazette. Better to be alone in a castle, I said, than to be a servant in hell. The door closed. The police cars flashed their lights, painting the living room walls in strokes of red and blue. Then they drove away. Mr. Davis stood by the window, adjusting his cufflinks. That went, Saoting Haling, 2 hash is greater than well, he said, using the understatement of the century. I looked at the Mont Blanc pen lying on the floor in a puddle of ink. I bent down and picked it up. I wiped the ink off with my thumb. It is over, Davis, I said. Not quite, he replied. We have to file the restraining orders. We have to deal with the press. The neighbors saw everything. Let them see, I said. I have nothing to hide anymore. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The rain had started again. It washed over the driveway, scrubbing away the tire tracks of the police cars. My house was silent again, but this time, it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped firing. The air smelled of ozone and victory. I was alone. I was 48 years old. I had no children left. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 6 months, I could breathe. The police cruisers did not leave quietly. They departed with a spectacle of flashing lights that painted the manicured lawns of my subdivision in oscillating shades of emergency red and bruising blue. In a neighborhood like ours, where the Homeowners Association sends a citation if your grass grows 1/4 of an inch too high, a double arrest was not just a scandal, it was a nuclear event. I stood on my front porch, wrapping my cashmere cardigan tighter around my body against the damp chill. I did not hide behind the curtains. I did not retreat into the shadows of the hallway. I stood there, illuminated by the porch light, and watched them go. Across the street, Linda Miller, the president of the Homeowners Association, was standing by her rhododendrons. She was wearing her bathrobe, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Next to her, the Davises and the Patels had gathered in a small, hushed cluster. They were looking at the receding police cars. And then, inevitably, their gazes turned to me. I could feel the weight of their judgment from 50 feet away. It was a tangible thing, heavy and suffocating. In their eyes, I was no longer just the successful bakery owner. I was the woman whose son was a criminal. I was the mother who had failed. There is a specific kind of pity reserved for women whose children go bad. A mixture of sympathy and suspicion. What did she do wrong? They were asking themselves. Did she spoil him? Was she too cold? I met Linda's gaze. I did not look away. I lifted my chin slightly, a gesture of defiance that cost me every ounce of energy I had left. I am not the villain here, I told myself. I am the survivor. I turned and walked back inside, locking the door with a decisive click. The house was quiet, but the air still felt violated. I walked into the kitchen and saw the half-empty glass of water I had almost signed my life away for. I picked it up and smashed it into the sink. The sound of breaking glass was becoming the soundtrack of my life. The next morning, the fallout began in earnest. I drove to the law offices of Davis and Associates at 9 o'clock. My phone had been ringing incessantly since dawn. Unknown numbers. Numbers from the county jail. I had silenced them all. Davis met me in his conference room. He looked tired but grimly satisfied. We have secured the temporary restraining order, he said, sliding a document across the polished mahogany table. It covers you, your home, and your place of business. If Kevin or Brittany attempt to contact you, directly or through a third party, they will be in violation of their bail conditions. Bail? I asked, my voice sharp. They have not made bail yet, Davis clarified. The judge set it high. Given the flight risk and the severity of the charges, $50,000 each. Kevin has been calling everyone he knows. I suspect he expects you to pay it. I laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. He thinks I will pay to release the man who tried to poison me? He is desperate. Laura, narcissists do not handle consequences well. They collapse. What about the press? I asked. There is a blurb in the local police blotter. Davis said, couple arrested in Bellevue for elder abuse and fraud. No names yet, but it is a matter of time. The rumor mill moves faster than print. Let it move. I said, I want everyone to know. I left the law office and drove straight to the Gilded Crumb. I had not stepped foot in my own bakery in weeks, exiled by the lies Kevin and Brittany had spun. My heart pounded as I parked the car. This was the second front of the war, reclaiming my reputation. When I pushed open the glass door, the smell of yeast and caramelized sugar hit me like a warm embrace. It smelled like sanity. Sarah, my manager, was behind the counter. When she saw me, she dropped a pair of tongs. They clattered onto the floor. Laura? She gasped. Her eyes scanned me, looking for signs of the dementia I was supposed to have. Kevin said, Zou je, Ding Hao, Ling, 2 hekje is groter dan I said you were bedridden. He said you did not even know who you were anymore. I walked around the counter and pulled her into a hug. I held on tight, smelling the flour on her apron. Kevin leaped. Sarah, I said, my voice steady enough for the other employees to hear. Kevin and his wife have been arrested. They were drugging me. They were trying to steal the business. A collective gasp went through the kitchen. The dough roller stopped. The oven timers beeped unnoticed. Drugging you? Sarah pulled back. Horror etched on her face. Oh my God. Laura, we thought, Sayuting 2# is greater than we thought you were dying. He sounded so convincing. That is what con artists do. I said, taking off my coat and hanging it on the hook where it belonged. They convince you that the sky is green and that they are the only ones who can save you. But I am back now, and I am perfectly sane. I tied on my apron. I washed my hands. I picked up a ball of dough. For the next 6 hours, I worked. I kneaded my anger into the bread. I piped my grief into the eclairs. I let the physical labor ground me in reality. I was not a victim. I was a baker, and I was damn good at it. By the afternoon, the story had spread. Customers, regulars who had known me for years, came in with wide eyes, ordering coffee just to get a look at me. Is it true? Their eyes asked. Did her son really try to kill her? I served them with a smile. I did not hide. Yes, I am fine. I told Mrs. Higgins. Yes, it has been a difficult time. I told the mayor's wife. I controlled the narrative. If I had stayed home, the whispers would have turned me into a senile invalid. By standing here, counting change and frothing milk, I was proving them wrong, but the real blow came 3 days later. Davis called me while I was at home, scrubbing the guest room walls to remove the scuff marks from Kevin's boots. We have an update on the defendants, Davis said. Sayuting Ling, due cancelletto è maggiore di tell me. Brittany took a plea deal, he said. I stopped scrubbing. Of course she did. She turned on Kevin. Davis continued. She gave the district attorney everything. She claimed Kevin was the mastermind. She said she was a victim of coercive control. She claimed he forced her to crush the pills. She is painting him as an abusive monster to save her own skin. And the paternity? I asked. She admitted it on record. Davis said. She admitted the child belongs to a senior partner at a law firm in Seattle. Apparently, she was using the baby to extort both you and the biological father simultaneously. She is a piece of work. Laura, and Kevin? He is devastated. Davis said, not because of the jail time, but because she left him. He is sitting in a cell, realizing that the woman he destroyed his family for has sold him out for a reduced sentence. He is crying. Laura, he is asking for you. I looked at the sponge in my hand. It was gray and tattered. He can ask, I said coldly, but the line is disconnected. That evening, I went to the grocery store. It was a mundane task, but it felt like walking through a minefield. I ran into Linda Miller in the produce aisle. There was no avoiding it. Laura, she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. We heard about the arrest. The police were at my house asking for security camera footage. I picked up a bell pepper, examining it for blemishes. I am sorry for the disturbance. Linda, it will not happen again. Is it true? She asked, leaning in. Is it true about the drugs? And the baby? I looked her in the eye. It is all true. Linda, my son is a criminal. His wife is a fraud. And I am the one who called the police. Linda recoiled slightly, surprised by my bluntness. She expected tears. She expected shame. She did not expect the icy armor I had forged. Well, she stammered, you are Sayuting Ling. 2# is greater than very brave. I am not brave, I said, placing the pepper in my basket. I am just finished. I walked away. I could feel her eyes boring into my back. I knew that by tomorrow, the entire neighborhood would know that Laura Bennett was not a woman to be trifled with. They would fear me. Perhaps they would certainly judge me, but they would never pity me again. I drove home to my empty house. The silence was still there, but it had changed texture. It was no longer the heavy, oppressive silence of impending doom. It was a hollow, echoing silence. The house felt too big. The rooms felt too clean. I walked into the nursery, the room that was never really a nursery. I looked at the crib I had bought. I looked at the mobile with the little wooden stars. The social workers had taken Toby. He was with a foster family now, waiting for the DNA results to confirm the biological father. I would never see him again. The child I had rocked to sleep, the child whose laughter had been the only light in this nightmare, was gone, and he was never mine to begin with. I sat in the rocking chair in the dark room. I did not cry. I was done crying. I felt a profound sense of exhaustion, a weariness that went down to the marrow of my bones. I had won the war. The enemy was vanquished. My assets were safe. My reputation was bruised but intact. But as I sat there in the dark, listening to the wind rattle the window pane, I realized the cost of victory. I had cut out the cancer, yes, but I had cut out a piece of my heart to do it. The silence in the house was no longer a predator waiting to pounce. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the rooms, leaving behind a stillness so profound it felt like pressure against my eardrums. For the first 3 days after the arrest, I did nothing but clean. It was a manic, compulsive need to scrub the physical evidence of their existence from my home. I hired a professional carpet cleaning crew to extract the wine stains and the dirt tracked in by Kevin's boots. I paid a painter double his usual rate to come in on a Sunday and paint over the scuff marks on the hallway walls. Marks made when the police dragged my screaming son out the door. But even with the smell of fresh latex paint and industrial bleach filling my lungs, I could still see them. I walked through the living room, my fingers trailing along the back of the sofa. I paused at the spot where the vase had shattered. The floor was pristine now, the wood gleaming under a layer of wax. Yet, I could still see the shards. I could still hear the crunch of glass under Kevin's heel. I realized then that a house is not just wood and drywall. It is a recording device. It absorbs the emotions of the people who live inside it. My walls had absorbed greed. My floorboards had absorbed hatred. My kitchen, once the heart of the home where I baked cookies and rolled dough, had absorbed the toxicity of crushed pills and poisoned tea. I sat down on the bottom step of the staircase. I looked up at the ceiling of the second floor. I was grieving, but it was a strange, twisted kind of grief. I was not mourning a death. Kevin was alive. He was sitting in a county jail cell 5 miles away, wearing an orange jumpsuit, likely blaming me for his predicament. I was mourning a memory. I closed my eyes and tried to picture Kevin as a boy, 7 years old, missing a front tooth, running into the kitchen with a handful of dandelions he had picked from the yard. For you, Mommy, that boy was dead. He had been dead for a long time, killed slowly by entitlement and the corrosive belief that the world owed him a living. The man who replaced him was a stranger who happened to share his DNA. The phone rang, shattering my reverie. It was Mark. My eldest son had been calling every day since the news broke. He sounded terrified, as if he expected me to shatter into 1,000 pieces through the receiver. "Hello, Mark," I said. My voice sounded flat, even to my own ears. "Mom," Mark said. He sounded breathless. "I just spoke to the district attorney. He says Kevin is looking at 10 to 15 years. Fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. Jesus? Mom, I cannot believe he did this." I said quietly. There was a pause. Mark sihe, a heavy, ragged sound. I feel so guilty. Mom, I should have been there. I knew he was struggling. I knew he was jealous. If I had visited more, Saoyudzing Ling, 2# is greater than if I had paid more attention. Saoyudzing Ling, R. Jinghao Dayu. Stop, I said. I stood up and walked toward the window. Do not do that. Do not rewrite history to make yourself the villain. Mark, this was not your fault, and it was not mine. Kevin made choices. He chose to gamble. He chose to lie. He chose to drug his own mother. But he is my brother. Mark whispered. He is a criminal. Mark, I corrected him, and right now, I need you to be my son, not his brother. Mark fell silent. I looked out at the backyard. The grass was overgrown. Kevin was supposed to mow it 3 weeks ago. He never did. Mom, Mark said, his voice softer. Listen, I talked to Sarah. She says you are back at the bakery. But, Saoyudzing Ling, 2# is greater than you should not be alone in that house. It is too big. It has too many bad memories. Why do not you come to Chicago? You can stay with us. We have the guest suite. You can rest. It was a kind offer, a sensible offer. For a moment, I considered it. I imagined escaping to Chicago, hiding in Mark's guest room, letting him and his wife take care of me. But then I felt a prickle of resistance. If I went to Chicago, I would be the victim again. The poor, traumatized mother who needed saving. I would be trading one form of dependency for another. No, Mark, I said. Mom, please. I am not running away, I said firmly, and I am not looking for a caretaker. I just got my freedom back. I am not going to hand it over to you. Even if you have good intentions, then what will you do? Mark asked. You cannot stay there. Not after everything. I looked around the living room. I looked at the ghost of the life I had thought I wanted. The family gatherings. The grandchildren playing on the rug. The legacy passed down through generations. It was all a lie. The legacy was poison. You are right, I said. I cannot stay here. This house, Saoyudzing Ling, 2# is greater than it was the prize. Mark, it was the thing Kevin wanted so badly he was willing to kill me for it. He wanted the inheritance. I paused. A cold, sharp clarity washed over me. So I am going to remove the prize. What does that mean? Mark asked. I am selling it. I said, selling the house? But, Saoyudzing Ling, 2# is greater than that is our childhood home. Dad built that deck. I know, I said, and now it is a crime scene. I am selling it. Mark, I am selling the furniture. I am selling the silver. I am selling the antique clock Kevin loved so much. I am turning it all into cash. And then, I said, a small, genuine smile touching my lips for the first time in months. I am going to spend it. Spend it? Every dime. I said, I am going to burn through his inheritance while I am still alive. I am going to travel. I am going to eat well. I am going to give it to charity. But I promise you this. Mark, Saoyudzing Ling, 2 Rot ist größer als wenn I die. There will be nothing left to fight over. Mark was silent for a long time. Then he laughed. It was a shocked, nervous laugh, but it was real. You are serious. Are you not? Dead serious. I said. I hung up the phone. I felt lighter. The crushing weight on my chest had lifted. I walked to the kitchen counter where I kept my address book. I flipped through the pages until I found the number I needed. It was not a doctor. It was not a therapist. It was a real estate agent, the most ruthless one in Bellevue. I dialed the number. "Hello, this is Brenda." A voice chirped. "Brenda, this is Laura Bennett," I said. "I want to list my house." "Oh, wonderful. When were you thinking of putting it on the market?" "Today," I said. "And Brenda? Sao yu ting haling? Katu?" "Yes, price it to sell. I want to be out of here in 30 days. I hung up the phone. I looked around the kitchen one last time. I saw the ghost of Kevin sitting at the table, demanding money. I saw the ghost of Brittany crushing pills at the counter. "Get out," I whispered to the empty room. I grabbed my keys and walked out the front door. I did not look back. I drove to the bakery, the only place that was truly mine. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. It was the end of the day. It was the end of an era, but as I merged onto the highway, accelerating the car, I realized it was also the beginning. I was alone. I was scarred, but for the first time in 22 years, I was entirely, terrifyingly free. The sun over the Amalfi Coast did not just shine. It commanded the sky. It turned the Tyrrhenian Sea into a sheet of hammered turquoise and warmed the stone terrace beneath my feet. I sat at a small wrought iron table, a half-empty glass of Pinot Grigio catching the light. 6 months. It had been exactly 6 months since the police lights faded from my driveway in Bellevue. I looked different. The woman who stared back at me from the compact mirror was not the gray, haggard creature who had shuffled through the corridors of her own home, terrified of her own shadow. My hair was cut short, a chic bob that framed a face which had finally remembered how to smile. I had lost 15 pounds, not from stress, but from walking the cobblestone streets of Europe. My phone buzzed on the table. It was an email from Davis. Subject: update on K.B. I hesitated for a moment. The old Laura, the mother who was wired to worry, wanted to delete it, unread. But the new Laura, the woman who had survived a coup attempt by her own flesh and blood, needed to see the ledger balanced. I opened the email. Kevin was out on parole, released early due to overcrowding and a plea deal that reduced his sentence in exchange for testifying against Brittany regarding the fraud ring she had been running. But freedom, for Kevin, was a relative term. According to the private investigator's report attached to the email, my son was currently living in a basement studio in Tacoma, working off the books as a dishwasher at a dive bar. His wages were being garnished to pay back the creditors he had defrauded. The luxury watch was gone. The designer clothes were gone. He was living the life he had always felt he was too good for. A life of hard labor and anonymity. Brittany was serving 3 years in a minimum security facility. The biological father of the baby had sued her for defamation and won, ensuring she would be destitute the moment she stepped back into society. I closed the email. I felt a phantom twing in my chest, a ghostly echo of the love I once held for the boy with the missing tooth. But it passed quickly, replaced by the cool sea breeze. I picked up another envelope on the table. This one was thick and creamy, embossed with the logo of the Bennett Foundation for Foster Youth. I had sold the house in Bellevue. It went for $2.5 million. A bidding war fueled by the tech boom. I sold the furniture. I sold the silver. I sold the crystal vase Kevin had shattered. Or at least, the remaining pieces of the set. I did not keep the money. Well, not all of it. I kept enough to ensure I would never have to work again. enough to keep me in Italian wine and silk scarves until I took my last breath. But the bulk of Kevin's inheritance, the millions he had screamed about, the birthright he believed he was entitled to simply for existing, was gone. I had endowed a scholarship fund, specifically a fund for children who aged out of the foster care system without being adopted, children who had no parents, no safety net, and no one to bail them out, children who would work twice as hard for half as much as Kevin ever had. It was my final act of parenting. I was raising children I would never meet, giving them the chance my own son had thrown into the garbage. A waiter approached my table. He was young, with dark eyes and a kind smile. "Another glass?" "Signora?" he asked. "No, thank you, Marco." I said, "I will take the check." He nodded and placed a small leather folder on the table. I opened it. The bill was 40 euros, a trivial amount. I thought about the $3,000 I had paid to see my grandson. I thought about the price of the grandmother fee. I thought about the cost of the lawyers, the cost of the security cameras, the cost of the therapy I had attended to deprogram myself from the gaslighting. I had paid a high price for this view. I had paid with my family, but as I looked out at the horizon, where the blue of the sea met the blue of the sky, I realized something profound. Kevin was right about one thing. He had told me I would die alone. I was alone. I sat at a table for one. I slept in a bed for one. I walked the streets of a foreign city with no hand to hold. But I was not lonely. Loneliness is living in a house full of people who see you as a target. Loneliness is staring into the eyes of your child and seeing only a calculator. Loneliness is the silence of a home where love is conditional upon a bank transfer. This was not loneliness. This was solitude. This was peace. I placed a 50-euro note on the tray. I did not ask for change. I stood up, smoothing the front of my linen dress. I picked up my sunglasses and slid them on, shielding my eyes from the brilliance of the sun. I had lost a son. I had lost a grandson. I had lost the illusion of the perfect American family, but I had kept the only thing that truly mattered. I had kept myself. I turned my back on the view and walked into the winding streets of Positano. I had a bakery to find. I heard they made a lemon cake that rivaled my own. And for the first time in my life, I was just a customer. I was free.